Svati and her husband Sudakar were living that same bright and beautiful life that lovers enjoy only in books and dreams when a sudden attack lands Sudakar in the hospital bed. As the assailants who disfigured him vanished, the police launched a manhunt for them. But as the noose tightens around the suspects, an unexpected clue leads the detectives to a two-faced criminal with extremely picky eating habits. 2017, Hyderabad, India. Hyderabad is the capital of the state of Telangana in southern India. It's the largest hub for high technology and the fourth most populous city in India, with a population of approximately 7 million people. One of the main attractions in the state is Charminar, which translates to Four Towers, a cultural monument and mosque built over 400 years ago. This is also the city where 32-year-old Sudakar Reddy lives with his wife Swati and their 2 young children. Late one evening in November 2017, a terrified woman called for an ambulance. It was Swati. She was in a hysterical state, screaming that her husband had been attacked with acid. In the background, cries and groans of the man, clearly in agony, could be heard. The operator assured the woman that medical help was on its way. In the hospital, doctors immediately tended to his wounds. It turned out he had suffered second-degree burns, mainly on his face, shoulders, chest, and slightly on his arms and leg. Sudakar and Swati had been married for over 5 years. He was a businessman providing contractor services at quarries, while she worked as a nurse. In their free time, nothing brought them more joy than quiet family evenings. But Sudakar's business was growing, and he spent more and more time at work. Swati began to feel lonely and pushed to the sidelines. On the day of the attack on their family, she tried once again to get her husband's attention by preparing his favorite dish, lamb bone soup. However, as soon as they sat down to enjoy dinner, she heard some noise at the front door, and 4 masked men burst into the house, splashing a bottle of acid directly onto Sudakar's face. Upon hearing about the incident, investigators immediately wanted to talk to the eyewitness and learn all the details of what happened. The thing is, acid is extremely rarely used as a weapon, and it's usually not a random attack. The perpetrator doesn't aim to kill the victim, but to disfigure them for life, so the likelihood of it being done by a stranger was practically nil. However, Swati mentioned that the attackers who targeted her husband were wearing masks, and she wouldn't be able to identify them. That was all she could help the police with. But Sudakar's parents had something to add to this story. After a few days of their son's hospital stay, they began to suspect something. Their son and daughter-in-law's behavior seemed very strange, as if they were hiding something. When doctors came to change the patient's bandages, Swati forced her husband's parents to leave the room. Sudakar himself didn't seem eager to talk to them either, preferring to whisper or write down answers when they approached him. His manners also appeared somewhat unusual. When they expressed their suspicions to their daughter-in-law, she insisted that they had vivid imaginations and insisted on having her husband examined by a plastic surgeon as soon as his burns healed to restore his fac. The police, already skeptical of the 28-year-old Swati's words, brought her in for questioning. She repeated how everything had unfolded, again reassuring the investigators that her husband had no enemies or work-related problems. However, Swati couldn't stick to one version of events and changed her statements several times, finally admitting that their family life wasn't the fairy tale she had portrayed to others. The truth was that she had been visiting a physiotherapist named Rajesh Ajakalu for the past 2 years, and he had treated her very poorly. He had kept explicit photos of her and blackmailed Swati, forcing her into intimate relations with him. According to Swati, the blackmailer had gone so far as to threaten her husband and children's safety, making him a potential suspect in the attack on Sudakar. Killing a spouse out of jealousy is not uncommon, but what struck investigators as unusual was that he didn't kill Sudakar but disfigured him. It made them wonder what was going on inside this jealous lover's mind. By blackmailing Swati and disfiguring Sudakar, he had inadvertently brought the couple closer together. It was probably not what he had intended. Nevertheless, the police tried to contact Rajesh, which proved to be difficult. Rajesh's mother claimed he had been invited to a wedding after which no one had seen him. Running his name through the database, detectives discovered that the young and handsome man was not as straightforward as he seemed. He had forged documents to obtain a work permit as a physiotherapist, having only completed a year of the required 4 years of education. Could a person already involved in fraud be guilty of another crime? It was early to make bets, but a suspect emerged who was not averse to bending the law. Unable to reach the prime suspect, they put out a warrant for his arrest, meaning he was being sought by every police officer in the city. He might have a slim chance of escaping unless he was exceptionally clever. But what were the odds for a man who couldn't even finish his physiotherapy training? In the meantime, Swati, as well as Sudakar's parents and brother, spent all their time by his bedside. When Sudakar began to feel a bit better and was allowed to eat, his parents asked for his favorite dish, lamb bone broth. Their surprise was immense when Sudakar refused to eat it, stating that he was a vegetarian. This was the final straw that broke the patience of Sudakar's family. Wondering how such a big meat lover could change his culinary preferences, they realized that something was amiss. Sensing deception, Sudakar's parents immediately contacted the police to report what had just happened. The detective returned to the hospital to take fingerprints and scan Sudakar's retinas. He explained to Sudakar's wife that it was a routine procedure needed for their records. At the police station, the officers compared his fingerprints with the employment records. What they found redirected the investigation in an entirely different direction. These were not Sudakar's fingerprints. So who was this man with second-degree burns pretending to be Swati's husband? The woman did her best to stand her ground. However, after several hours of intense interrogation, she gave in. Swati confessed that after several years of marriage, she had started to feel lonely. She was bored at home while her husband worked long hours. 2 years ago, Rajesh, a young and attractive physiotherapist, entered her life, providing her with the attention she had been missing. Swati continued to visit Rajesh as a physiotherapist, but their relationship evolved into something more when she confided in him about her unhappiness in her marriage. Since Sudakar often worked night shifts, the lovers found more opportunities to meet, even in the Reddy family home. Love made them reckless, and a week before the acid attack, Sudakar's cousin noticed them together in a car. Upon learning that her husband was seen with another man in the car, Swati was confronted by Sudakar, and she denied any wrongdoing, convincing him it was an innocent encounter. Love is blind, and the deceived husband chose to believe his wife over his cousin. Feeling anxious, Swati quickly informed her lover about her husband's knowledge of their affair. She managed to deflect his suspicions temporarily, but it was only a matter of time before her husband would catch them red-handed. Rajesh suggested they run away together and leave their old lives behind. However, as much as Swati wanted to be with Rajesh, she was afraid of losing custody of her children and didn't want to hurt her family. But if she couldn't disappear, her husband would have to, permanently. Ironically, she worried about what her parents would think if she disappeared, but her new career as a murderer wouldn't concern them in the least. In any case, she had a plan. In the 2014 Indian thriller movie, whose title translates to Who Is He?, the main character undergoes a face transplant after an accident and uses a new identity for revenge against his enemies. Swati apparently saw this movie as she suggested to her lover to burn his face with acid so that, after a plastic surgery operation, he could live with her instead of her husband. The conspirators even inquired about the cost of the operation at a private clinic, explaining that they needed information about burn victims. The doctor informed them that such an operation was possible only if the burns covered less than 30% of the body. Furthermore, Swati promised to obtain a syringe with anesthesia from her workplace. When Sudakar fell asleep, they would kill him, hide the body, and have Rajesh take his place. After all the dust had settled and Rajesh had fully recovered, they planned to move to the city of Pune in western India with their 2 young children. The challenge was convincing people that Rajesh was Sudakar. While the 2 men were of similar build and height, Rajesh would not only have to learn everything about Sudakar's family, habits, and quirks, but also speak and move like him. Even a professional actor would have struggled with this, let alone a physiotherapist with limited training. It was a ludicrous plan, if not for the fact that an innocent person's life was at stake. The lovers decided not to delay and put their plan into action as quickly as possible. Sudakar returned home late on the evening of November 26th. He was buying gifts for his son's upcoming birthday celebration, scheduled for the following week. Swati retrieved a syringe and, while he slept, injected him with a powerful anesthetic, filling his veins. Afterward, The two lovers took an iron rod and, one by one, began to strike the defenseless man in the head. After wrapping him in a carpet, they transported him to a forest 70 kilometers away from the city and buried him. However, before doing so, they made sure to remove his ring and set Sudakar on fire to disfigure his face. The lovers returned home, and the next day carried out the second part of their plan. With Rajesh's consent, Swati sprayed a mixture of gasoline and acid on his face and set him on fire. Undoubtedly, she now regretted not burning Rajesh's hands as well to prevent fingerprint identification. Swati was arrested and charged with her husband's murder. She did not object when asked to take the police to the burial site. Rajesh was allowed to recover in the hospital on the condition that he would be taken into custody once he was better. 3 weeks after Rajesh, pretending to be Sudakar, entered the hospital, he was wheeled through a crowd of reporters and placed in a waiting car that took him to the police station. The man admitted his part in the scheme and told journalists that he had wanted to run away with his beloved woman. But she came up with an entirely different plan. She wanted to kill her husband because she feared losing her children and the respect of her family. Incredibly, this case lacks a logical conclusion. After spending 8 months in prison, Swati was released on bail pending the trial. None of her family members came to pay the required amount. However, she was still released, but since no one was waiting for her at her parents' home, Swati was placed in a shelter for women in a neighboring city. The court date was set for March 17, 2021, but she did not appear. An arrest warrant was issued for Swati, but to this day, no one knows her whereabouts. Swati managed to convince her husband that she had not had an affair, persuaded Sudakar's parents that the bandaged imposter in the hospital was their son, and even convinced her lover not only to kill her husband, but also to impersonate him. She is a master manipulator who will stop at nothing to achieve her goals if not apprehended. One can only hope that the police will catch the criminal, and she will face the court for the cold-blooded murder of her husband. If both accused individuals are found guilty, they could face imprisonment for up to 14 years. What man would allow disfiguring his face for a woman? And what woman would inflict such pain on a loved one? If you think about it, Swati and Rajesh seem to be a perfect match for each other. Did they really believe they could kill a person, impersonate them, and expect no one to notice? It's not surprising that their perfect plan fell apart like a bowl of soup. Rajesh promised Swati that he would do anything for their love, but eat meat? No, he wasn't ready for that.